Welcome to the Fashion is Cool podcast, where we explore fashion's business side and the entrepreneurs behind it. Hosted by Dwight, your guide to diverse careers and inspiring stories in fashion.
Welcome to the Fashion is Cool podcast. I am your host, Dwight Carter. And this show, we explore what makes fashion truly cool, from industry insights to career inspiration. Today, I am honored to have Carmela Spinelli with me.
Thank you.
A celebrated fashion historian and an educator. Carmela has over 20 years experience shaping the fashion industry and academia. At the Savannah College of Art and Design, she led the top-ranked fashion program and continues to lecture at the SCAD Museum of Fashion and Film. Her expertise has taken her to renowned institutions worldwide, like the Mad Museum in Paris and the Brooklyn Museum in New York. She has held executive roles at Celine, under LVMH and Saks Fifth Avenue, and served as an associate chair at Parsons. With a master's degree in history of design from Parsons and the Smithsonian Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum, her journey is nothing short of extraordinary.
Oh, thank
This
you.
episode, I mean, that's a lot. That's really, I'm really excited.
Years
Yeah,
I'm dating myself with all this
Right.
stuff.
It looks good.
Telling you how old I am.
So, Carmela, why don't you tell us, I mean, if I didn't miss anything, which
Yeah.
I think is, like I said, everything that I just said is extraordinary. So if there's
Thank
something else you
you.
want to tell the audience, introduce yourself a little bit.
I just
Go ahead.
really enjoy this industry, and from the academic side and from the industry side, and kind of synthesizing all of this in part to the students. And actually the passion, my passion for, I'm not going to say passion for fashion, the love of object study and fashion history is so timely right now when, there's so much visual imagery. And, I like to say that fashion has an ancestry. So this is important to know. Is it industry, studying history? And it's only relevant when you study history if you bring it to the present so that you can synthesize it for the future.
Right. Okay. So we're going to get right into the first question, which we're going to dive. It starts right off.
Let's go.
With your extensive background in fashion education from SCAD to Parsons, what alternative career paths within the fashion industry do you recommend to students who still want to contribute creatively, but maybe not want to be a fashion designer?
Yeah, it's a really great question, because there's a lot of peripheral businesses that are around fashion. Okay, so let's talk about beauty and fragrance. I mean, SCAD has a beauty and fragrance department. They have a BFA in beauty and the business of beauty and fragrance. So students can look at this. I mean, this is a gigantic industry, huge, billions of dollars. And so they need to know design, of course, but the legacy of the brand, how does that brand extend into their beauty products and skincare and makeup and cosmetics, fragrance? Oh my goodness. It's one of those industries that is just blowing up. Also accessories. I mean, people don't think, they think fashion, design, clothing, but the extension into shoes and handbags and accessories is also enormous. And the drivers often of the brand, that's where the money is being made, beauty and fragrance and accessories. So these are industries in of itself that are really, and my colleague Melanie Moore always says, the business of beauty and fragrance is a completely different business model than fashion. And it is, but it's something that students should really take advantage to study and to look at for the future, because it's so rich and there's so much money to be made there. So with a design ideology and what do I want to say? Sensibility. With a design sensibility, you can take that into other areas that's not fashion, not clothing, but is fashion related.
Yeah, I've never even thought about the
Yeah.
fragrance industry.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. And think of all the imagery with the fragrance in the fragrance industry, and think about the social media campaign. I mean, the social strategies now. Listen, companies are hiring social strategists, and it doesn't mean like getting on their TikTok and doing that. It's sophisticated marketing data, it's research, and then it's creating campaigns for these fashion companies. And again, with the design sensibility, I really believe that students have an advantage to that combined with the market data. So they need, there's that balance of business and creativity that's always they always have to look at both.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great information. So how has your experience working in executive roles at major companies like Celine and Saks Fifth Avenue shaped your understanding of the different career opportunities within the fashion and beyond design?
So we're talking about old retail. I'll say old retail. So when customers came into the store and you had to work with the client and you had to know client needs, you had to clientele. I mean, Saks Fifth Avenue, I'm going to tell you something, the 80s was incredible. New York City was Wall Street, and imagine everybody coming just buying clothes. And that interaction, seeing the fashion shows, the designers in those days would come to the store and they were there at trunk shows. Donna Karan, Oscar de la Renta, Carolina Herrera, Christian Lacroix came and did a huge fashion show. So I got to experience that, which was so valuable to what's happening now because the way that you relate with the client is different, but not really. Client is very important because they're buying everything. So that's what I have to say about knowing the industry, knowing how the industry works, and understanding how supply chain works, deliveries, buying, budgets, employees' relationships, staffing a floor, understanding seasons. The fashion industry changed after COVID, but what you need to do is when you're buying for spring in February, what's going to happen when it hits the floor? I mean, there's so much thought into those business models that is different right now, but that experience has been invaluable in talking about how it's different. You can't explain to students how important it is to do business now if they don't have an idea of what happened before.
Right. Did you ever work retail?
I
You were a
worked at
retail
Saks
person?
Fifth Avenue, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
what I did at Saks Fifth Avenue is I was a school teacher.
Okay.
I taught social studies and history.
Okay.
And one day it was a holiday and I went to New York City. I can tell you what I wore that day. I had Norman Kamali 2-piece outfit on with Charles Jourdain shoes. And I went to Saks and I said, I got to work in the store. I walked up to HR, said, I want a job here. I'd like to work here today. So they said, okay, well, they put me in beauty and fragrance in the department because I had worked in college for Estee Lauder. And I got to meet Mrs. Lauder. God, I'm really telling you how old I am. I got to meet Mrs. Lauder many times as she would come to the counter. So they put me in the fragrance department in beauty, which was a blast. And I remember her saying to me, make sure that you wear hose. So you were not allowed to expose your toes on the floor. And that started it. So I started there. And then I went to what's called the Fifth Avenue Club, which is like where the VIPs go to shop. And I was really doing styling and I was the assistant to a woman who had just big, giant clients. And then we opened the men's club, which we had giant clients. Tony Bennett was a client. Ethan Hawke, when he was a really young guy going to the film festival, came in to shop with us. And that was a blast. Those Giorgio Armani suits were like flying out of the store, all those Wall Street guys. It was a fantastic time to be at Saks Fifth Avenue and to be in retail. It was really good. Celine was also a wonderful experience because I was buying for the store. And the store is on 57th Street and Madison. And I bought also for the East Coast stores. There were just 3 or 4 of them. So I loved being in the store. It was next to the Four Seasons. I know the celebrities would walk by, they'd come in. It was a great time to be in retail. It's challenging now,
Yeah.
but I would say that era that I was there was kind of the golden era. The 80s in New York City was a great time.
Yeah. And you said that the fragrance is a huge opportunity, and that's where you started.
Yeah.
And it just blew up from there.
Yeah. They put me behind this counter that was called the Outpost. And so every week they would switch up who was coming in. And so I got to stand next to designers. Jeffrey Bean, when he launched his fragrance, I worked with him for the day. Pierre Balmain, who was extremely cranky. I got to stand next to him all day. And Karl Lagerfeld was, they had taken over the whole counter with Inès de la Fressange. I'll never forget that promotion ever, because he signed a photograph for me that I have in my bathroom that I look every morning and say, what should I wear today, Karl? It was an incredible time to be. Diane von Furstenberg launched her fragrance, and she had a whole parade coming down Fifth Avenue. They closed Fifth Avenue. Halston coming down the staircase. I mean, it was 80s extravaganza. It was a time that I'm so glad I lived.
That's great. So
yeah.
we talked about fragrance as being an option.
Yeah.
In your global recruitment initiatives, have you noticed any other emerging fashion careers, industry trends that are particularly exciting for students to explore?
I see a lot of students wanting to do merchandising and marketing, which is really terrific, because I really like when they say to me, I want to do fashion. And they say, okay, what in fashion do you want to do? I want to do marketing. I said, oh, good. Because when they say design, and we've talked about this before, Dwight, I try to talk them out of it. And the reason why I do that is not because I really want to talk them out of it. It's a test. I ask these questions and I really want to know, is it design that you really want? Or do you really want to shop and you want to be in the clothes and you want to style and you want to have influence as to who's coming in and you want to have influence. You want to be an influencer. What is it that you really, really want? Do you want to be at the sewing machine? Do you want to cut fabric? Do you want to do pattern making? Do you want to be able to make a 2D garment into a 3D garment? Do you want that struggle? Do you want to be able to change collections twice a year, have a vocabulary, an identity, and a voice, and still be relevant? It's a very difficult job. Designers are really incredible creatives. I have tremendous respect for fashion designers. Tremendous. It is very difficult.
And expensive.
And it is expensive, yes.
Very expensive. I don't know if I could. I guess if I wanted to, I could do it, but I don't. It just from working with designers and how much the cost are, it just seems like.
And it's expensive because you want it to be quality. And, you know, there's a lot of upcycling happening now, which is a great initiative. And I know it's not, when students show me a collection of upcycled garments, I think it's incredible, but I want them to think, so how are you going to maintain your business? You have to keep going with this upcycling. You have to keep, I mean, there's plenty of clothes out there, but how you make that a collection and then continue to create new things and continue to sell new things, where really each piece is going to be one of a kind. That's very difficult.
Yeah.
So, you know, what I love about this generation is like, it's okay. Listen, I have the can-do spirit. I'm going online. You know, I'm like gig industry, you know, it's all that. I mean, they're starting businesses on their own. They're bogged down by the retail machine, and it's difficult, but I think they're managing it and doing some really cool stuff.
What key skills do you believe that students should develop if they are aiming for fashion-related careers, like branding, exhibition design, or merchandising? A lot of schools have. Most of the universities have fashion merchandising. It's like the big degree that everyone has, besides fashion design.
So I really like when students take other classes. So what is a wonderful thing about SCAD is that you can collaborate. You can take an industrial design class. It's not difficult to go and explore and experiment with. Let's say you wanted to try accessory design, you wanted to do sneaker design, you wanted to do a a business of beauty and fragrance class, things open your mind to the other possibilities of what you have in front of you. So you're not approaching fashion design maybe the way that an industrial designer is, but you're going to learn how industrial designers think and take that application process, a thinking process, that creative critical thinking, and apply it to your clothes. And I think crossover is always really, really important. It's just exploration of something else where you challenge yourself to learn something new, to get out of your comfort zone, which is really difficult to do. People want to stay in their comfort zone. I mean, I have architecture students. I was a thesis advisor for an architecture student who wanted to do a fashion related project. And she actually got the thesis of the year award because of the way she was approaching her architecture, which when you think about fashion is architecture for the body. It's a three-dimensional space that we house ourselves in. So looking at other disciplines is always a benefit. Art history, absolutely. Fashion history, don't even tell me you're not taking an art history class and a fashion history class. But the other things, more like three-dimensional things, exploring those kind of things, using your hands, fibers, oh my goodness, creating your own textiles, and you're using the 3D printer. And of course, marketing and business and strategy, social strategy is a fantastic major. So it's really looking at those other things. I mean, I tell students, look at an auto design magazine, look at cars. Don't keep looking at Vogue. I mean, it's not the end. Because what happens is when you look at Vogue, and if something happens between this first year student and the second year, you start to think that you have to think like they do in Vogue. And you do. But when you're looking at other things, you're finding inspiration and references and ideas and stimulus from places that are not related that you're going to bring in to your collection.
I've always wanted to pair up a designer and an architect.
It's very cool.
And see what would happen.
Well, Tom Ford started as an architecture student at Parsons.
Oh, I didn't know.
Oh, yeah, he did. And listen, we know what he's done. So he graduated in fashion, but he started in architecture. And a lot of designers are architects or doctors. So you look at those other disciplines, and it totally makes sense that an architecture sensibility would really be good for fashion.
Yeah.
Because think about, you have a flat pattern. So you think about building plans and architectural plan. And what you're doing is then elevating that to 3D. So you're flat, and then you're making this building, which is a dress.
Well, you are in education, and you've navigated between both business and academic sides of fashion. How would you think the academic study of fashion can inform and enrich the work of someone pursuing a non-design role in the industry?
Well, because the history of fashion also talks about the history of the fashion business and the industry.
Yeah.
And so when you study fashion, you're not just studying it from a design point of view, you're studying the changes in the market and the client, how the client changed and what impacts business, how political, social, economic, cultural changes impact fashion. And that comes from design and marketing and business. So it's all related. You can talk about design specifically, but you have to talk about how these giants like Madeleine Vionnet, I love to think about her all the time because I think if there's one person that you need to know, the name is Madeleine Vionnet, creating the showroom space. What is the environment that you're creating for your clients when they walk into your door? The marketing experience, the fashion experience extends to all of that. What's it like when they sit down? And how is it that Dior showed his collection in the 50s? It was, with the little cards. I mean, Balenciaga, Cristobal Balenciaga, not Demna. It was going to his show was a 2-hour. Diane Vreeland says it was like an orgasmic experience. These experiences are also part of the brand story. And so these experiences also help the today designer or marketer say, that's kind of a cool idea. Can we recreate that somehow? What can we do that gives you the feeling of that? What experience do I want to do and use for my client to extend the brand story? So the experience is really important, just as important as what comes down the runway. And sometimes the designer puts too much emphasis on the experience and not enough emphasis on what's coming down the runway or what they're showing. And that's got to be balanced because, you're going to have a fantastic show, but what happens afterwards is important.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to be able to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
So many designers that do fashion shows and the collection ends up in their
It's also a fortune
closet.
to do a fashion show.
Yeah.
It's a fortune.
Yes, it is. I'm producing one right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is very expensive.
So you know what I'm talking about too.
Yeah, I know it's expensive on just the show itself. If you add in the collections, and I can even imagine like total cost, of everything involved.
And there's something that the runway is not going away. The runway is here to stay. And for some reason, that catwalk is it is hard to put down. It does something to people, and the designers feel they want to do that walk at the end of the show. This is something that is so ingrained in our culture. But I do love to show students what happened during COVID, how creative designers were. And I think I do a lecture called Crisis and Creativity, that in times of crisis, how creative people became, whether it's the use of different materials, a silhouette, or the way that they presented the show. And I think of Jeremy Scott for Moschino used puppets.
Yeah.
J.W. Anderson sent beautiful kits with fabric swatches. I mean, each designer had a very different thing. Maria Grazia Chiuri for Dior took an idea from these late 1940s, which right after the war was this little showcase of 2-foot little dolls that were dressed completely handmade by the couturiers. So what she did was she had a trunk sent to her couture clients with all these little dolls in the case that you could see. And there's really cool ways. And also it goes back to the 18th century, sending the dolls throughout Europe to show what the dress would look like. So here's designers looking back at history to see how they're going to manage and navigate the marketing for today. There's always a link. Fashion has ancestry,
Yeah. I really liked the fashion experimentation during COVID.
Yeah.
It was very interesting.
It was very interesting. I mean, the Moschino show with the puppets.
Yeah.
Anna Wintour was in the front row. Hamish Bowles was in the front row.
Yeah.
Puppets.
I remember that.
Walked. There was a Nigerian designer, Hanifa, who used 3D models, and you didn't see the face, you didn't see the body, you just saw the dress moving. It was one of my favorites of all the shows. It was magnificent, sexy, body positivity. It's like, God, she's got it going on.
Yeah.
That was a lot of really cool stuff happening. I mean, unfortunately, it was, for the people that it wasn't so good for, but crisis creates creativity. You get.
Yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm.
It really does. They saved, I'm assuming some of that was expensive to do to be that creative, but some of it probably wasn't. They probably saved some money back in.
Yeah.
Instead of producing a fashion show. So let's talk about the work you do with museums. Is there an intersection of fashion and museum or gallery work that students can find their careers in that?
I think that, your aesthetic, the aesthetic eye of a fashion designer is certainly applicable to gallery art. But you need to, for gallery art, you really need to know what's happening with the art world. But knowing fashion is also always a plus. But I'm going to say that the fashion exhibition genre has exploded. Museums now, even museums that are not fashion museum specific, are hosting fashion exhibitions because of the value that the fashion brings. It's kind of incredible. Actually, I think it's a phenomenon that I, love to see. So this is where you see fashion in context of a museum. And very often you'll see a relationship between the art that's surrounding the designer. So, for example, with Guo Pei, we had the opening her first show in the United States at the SCAD Museum of Art. But that museum traveled to 3 other museums. It went to the museum and National Museum in Vancouver. It went to the Bowers Museum, which is an Asia Civilization Museum, and also the Asia Civilization Museum in Singapore. So these garments, the Chinese garments of Guo Pei, were placed alongside this actual objects. So there you're going through looking at these magnificent clothes, and then you're getting an object study of, a Ming vase, a 14th century piece of porcelain, or embroidered tapestries and handcrafted gold jewelry from, the 19th century. So seeing this juxtaposition of garment and object is really powerful. It provides a context that is, really, I'm so happy to see this because those students would not be going, people in general, yes, would not necessarily be going into those galleries. So fashion is serving to lure you into even a deeper history, a more visual context for the design, which I love. I love museums. I've been loving museums since the first museum I ever went to as I was 6 years old was the Brooklyn Museum.
Wow.
And the thing I most remember is the gift shop. The gift shop, of course.
That's very cool. Yeah, I'm a big fan of museums too. I've always enjoyed the presentations and installations.
Yeah. You know what else, Dwight? I think that designers and retailers have a responsibility, and this is a very serious comment, to educate the next generation of consumers that are on their phones and it's flat. They see the front, they see the back. They don't see the details. Why is this dress $10,000? Why is this dress $600? What is the craftsmanship that has gone into this? Why is this suit, Tom Ford suit, cost what it costs? Talk to me about tailoring. They need to see, you have to educate their eyes. And so fashion exhibitions help to do that. And the way that you enter, if you can't get that $10,000 dress, the way you enter into that designer's world is how? Is through fragrance or a lipstick. And you get lured into that brand story. That's very important to me.
Yeah.
Because I'm very visual. So I like to see that.
What do you think the status is of retail right now? Like if I'm a designer, am I focusing on selling online through my own avenue, or is it beneficial for me to be in a big box store?
I think big box stores are having a moment right now. I think they've had a moment for a really long time. There's a balance that has to happen. I think they got too big. The stores got too big. So what has happened in these big box stores is that they're creating these little spaces, these little boutiques within the store to give the client a sense of personalization and just, the boutique experience. But brick and mortar is also not going away. People want to go into the store to see it and to experience it. I use that word a lot. It's all about the experience, what's happening with the stores. And that's not going to go away. We are still visual and we still want to see it in flesh and 3D. There's got to be a way to balance this. And I'm going to say this, I think what this next generation of creatives have in front of them is what's not there. They are the ones that are going to look at what's not there and say, this is the way we want to do this now. I'm not the one that's going to tell them that, because I often say sometimes the next job is what isn't there yet. They're going to create it. So this is where I think we need to look and say, look and see what's there and look and see what's not there.
How effective is a designer that follows the trends versus a designer that creates them?
Oh, that's a good question, Dwight Carter. So there's a difference between directional and derivative. And the directionals, they're out there. They're maybe have more of a difficult job, but it's necessary to drive the industry. We can't not just keep doing the same thing over and over again.
Right.
And some find comfort in doing the derivative, and that's okay. It's okay. But the leaders are those that are in the directional mode.
Right.
It's important. I guess there's a balance between the two, but that's where fashion design is a challenge, because the news comes from direction, not from derivation.
Yeah, because people are told, shoppers are told what is in, what they should buy, even but I may be a designer that has my own sense of style. And
then that's a whole nother story. What you just hit upon is style versus trend. And I have a big issue with what's happening with fashion magazines, because there's a giant contradiction. There's always going to be contradiction, but hyperbole for sure. Contradiction. So this is my issue. We're trying to get people to think sustainably. Buy better clothes. Don't do fast fashion and discard after every season. But what do fashion magazines do in every season? They're telling you, okay, the skinny belt is in now. Right. What about that big thick belt that you bought 3 years ago? What am I supposed to do with that? How are you going to tell someone, you got to hold on to that, but now we're supposed to let go and buy something expensive? That I want to see editors take things, and we're starting to see that a little bit more, take things that are in your closet and help me rework it. It's great to keep throwing new things at me. Sure, that Prada skirt's, $6,100. I'm not going to beat up on H&M and Zara. I'm not. I think there's a reason and there's a purpose that people go into Zara and buy a top and wear, the Prada skirt from years ago. And I don't think we're doing enough of this kind of education. This is where the style person comes in, not the trend person.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. And can you teach style?
Oh, you know what? I asked that question to Law Roach. I went to a lecture with his interview with Fern Malice, and they asked the audience to write questions down. But the third question was the one I asked. The students want to know if you could teach style. And he actually said, yeah. I think he's doing it. Actually, I think he's building a style program as we speak. I think it's a little more difficult to teach style. Honestly, I think if you are going to do any kind of a style program, you better make sure that you have fashion history in there.
Yeah.
You better know. You better go look at fashion exhibitions, and you can do that. You can find them online. Go into art museums and look at artwork. Go see sculpture. You just got to keep your eyes moving all the time.
We've talked about a lot today, and you've given some great advice. Any last words of wisdom, advice you would give any aspiring fashion entrepreneur?
So there's a quote that Louis Comfort Tiffany made in the 19th century. He was from New York. He lived in New York, went to the Near East, colorful spice markets, beautiful garments, just amazing sunsets. And he came back to New York where everybody was wearing black and it was dark and gray. And he said, I wonder why people make so little use of their eyes. And so we need to teach people to look and see and not just keep your eyes in that damn phone. look around up at the buildings, look at everything, go into museums, go to galleries, listen to music, eyes, ears, because that's where you synthesize the information. Visual information goes into your brain. Something happens in there with really creative, and then it will come out of you in a creative way. But if you're just looking at flat images, you are doing your brain a disservice.
Right.
So make use of your eyes. And I wear black all the time, so I should be like heeding my own advice, but that's my style.
That's your style.
And you have to have your identity. I mean, you have a sense of style, the glasses, the hair. It's just it.
Yeah.
So you have your identity and yourself, the style. You change it up a little bit here and there, but using your eyes is an understanding the difference between a style and a trend.
Yeah. No, that's great. So I have two questions for you, and they're not fashion related.
Okay.
This is just to get to know you.
Okay.
What is your favorite vacation spot?
Oh goodness, I have that I've been to already, or I love to go to.
Let's say you'd love to go to.
Well, I really want to go on safari. Really desperate to do that. I will tell you, one of the places that I went that I absolutely loved was Istanbul. It was fantastic. And a place that I always love to go to is, just because it's an hour and a half from New York City, is Bermuda.
Okay.
So I like cultural vacations because I find that I relax in a place like that. Paris, Florence. I'm going to Sicily for my nephew's wedding, which is going to be really exciting.
Oh, that's fun.
It's like the whole family's going to go. So I like cultural vacations because when I see culture and I do that, it helps me to relax.
Yeah.
I never rush around. It's like, I have to do all these things. I just use my eyes and just take it all in and observe and experience the food and, listen to people. And that's my favorite. I do like a little beach vacation once in a while.
Yeah.
I will say that. I get fancy a little bit on a beach vacation, but I just think this pink sands of Bermuda is a wonderful place to be.
Awesome. What about and this is coming off the top of my head, your favorite childhood memory?
Oh my God, Dwight, you're killing me. Okay, I have one.
All right.
It's related
See,
to
I knew
fashion.
you had one.
I have one. I have like 70 million, but this is one of my favorite ones because it really has impacted me and my career and my work.
Yeah.
So my father owned a men's clothing store.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of thinking I'm more tailored than I am frilly. So I think his aesthetic and I wore a lot of the boys' clothes, especially during the hippie era. I was wearing construction boots, jeans, like worker clothes from my father's store. But my childhood memory, my favorite one was I went on a couple of buying trips with him. And in those days, we would go down to Broadway, and it was the showroom, which was a huge showroom with all these clothes, but they had this giant spread of food. So we always went. He took me, he showed me around and told me how he was buying. And then when I was working for Celine, I said, Dad, you remember when we went to do this on this buying trip with you? I'm buying now for Celine. It's like, okay, what do you remember? 2 small, 1 small, 2 mediums, 2 larges. It was really a full circle. But that buying experience, and I don't live too far from where we used to go.
Yeah.
To the showrooms. We'd always come back with pajamas or something really cool. And then we'd go to Katz's Deli to have corned beef on rye sandwiches. That is one of my favorites.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Well, it's been a pleasure.
Same here. I'm happy to talk to you. And
yeah, I want to keep, we could talk for hours, but
I have a feeling that we could talk for hours. And I really want to say how much I enjoyed being in St. Louis, and thanks to Susan Sherman and everybody from the St. Louis Fashion Fund. Princess, I had such fun interview with her. But what you guys are doing there is really commendable. And if I have the chance to come back out anytime, you let me know. I'd love to. It was great. I mean, I remember Brandon looked around and said, I feel like I'm at the UN. You know, this culture, this group of people would never find themselves together anywhere. So that was a really wonderful experience.
Yeah. Well, you can come back for Gentlemen's Fashion Week when I have it in February.
Will you let me know when that's happening?
I will let you know. Yeah.
Okay.
Working on that. Well, thanks everyone for watching,
you.
listening. Please like, share, subscribe, do all the things, and I will see you again next time. Thanks again.
Bye. Thanks, Dwight.